Claire, why have you chosen to stand for the party you have, or as an independent, and how will your choice benefit Casey?
Thank you so much, Patrick. And hello to everyone on the forum tonight. My name is Claire Ferres-Miles, and I'm with you tonight because I want to represent you as the independent federal member for Casey. I too want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong peoples who are gathered here tonight and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Firstly, thank you to you for turning up tonight. It means that you want your voice heard, and together we shall be. Success for me is like tonight's event. We all become more active citizens in our democracy, that you make an informed choice of who you'd like to vote for this election. As your independent MP, I will be transparent and accountable to you, the people of Casey, not the parties. I've lived in Upwey for 25 years with my husband, Colin, and my tribe of 5 kids. And I've spent many happy and rewarding memories at the school council and committee meeting table, taking minutes and organising working bees. I've worked for 30 years in the transport and sustainability sector, a career that I've loved, and recently as CEO of Sustainability Victoria, which was a business with $100 million turnover and 200 staff. So I know a bit about how to work in government and how it ticks. I'm standing here today because the two-party system is not working. It has become paralysed with inaction. It's tired and negative, stuck and unable to solve the big issues of our future, caring for people and caring for our planet. I resigned from my job as CEO because I was embarrassed to be an Australian with our federal government a global laggard. There is too many rorts and corruption, and we need integrity in government. This behaviour does not represent us and our values, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion tonight. Thank you. So I'm going to kick off by saying I'm asking you to do something brave, which is possibly something you've never done before, which is to vote for an independent. And I also too had to be brave when I made the decision to resign from my job, which was a big call. But the reason that I touched on earlier in my opening remarks is really my experience in my professional life is that everyone I speak to has such extraordinary talent, passion, desire for investment to transition our economy. And last year at COP26, I couldn't believe how Australia was presented as a global laggard with an inability to transition our economy when that is not my experience of the Australians that I meet with. And I believe there are significant economic opportunities to have new investment, new jobs, new manufacturing here in Casey as part of that transition. And I also believe that I have the skills that I can be a really effective representative for our community to lead and support that transition. The second thing was that throughout my life of public service, I've always taken very seriously my role as a steward of public money. And I have been appalled at the rorts and corruption and lack of accountability for the way money is spent in Canberra, because that is not my experience of evidence-based, highest probity, peer-reviewed assessments of the highest public value that can be achieved from funding commitments. It is beyond description to me how anyone can argue against integrity in government. And finally, as a leader, I've always had very strong values of equity and inclusion, to treat everyone with respect and kindness. My campaign has a very strong code of conduct. For myself and all of our volunteers, we celebrate all candidates and all volunteers for their time and passion and commitment to be actively involved in our democracy. I have been dismayed at the treatment of women in our federal parliament, and I was equally dismayed last night when I was watching the great debate on Channel 9 when the question was asked, how do you define a woman? And I could not believe that that question was asked, because for me, it is about each of us as people that have values of treating each other equally. And I know from my own kids that there is no gender. They look at other people in terms of their values of kindness and respect, and they don't categorise other individuals based on their gender. And so finally, I did want to make a comment about, because a few of the candidates were talking about their ability to lead the government. And the beauty of an independent is that I am never in opposition. So as a crossbencher, my job is to make the government of the day more ambitious, more accountable, and to really work in a model of a minority government where we work together in the best interests of the country, rather than the tired sort of negative adversarial politics that we have experienced over the last decades. And I just did want to close my comments about, as an independent, I work for you, not the parties, and my commitment to you, and this is the common thing that I've heard across the electorate, is that I will be honest and I will be present and available as your MP for Kilsyth.
One of the questions that people submitted, how do you think you'll serve our particular area? So you've talked about the general scene in Australia. What about Kilsyth?
The issues I just mentioned there about respect, integrity and climate action are the issues that I've heard from people in Kilsyth. The fourth one I would add is around national resilience and local emergency preparedness. I lived through the 2009 fires. Last year, I listened to the sounds of trees falling around my house. I think there are a lot of members of our community that are still quite traumatised by the storms last year. And what I've heard from people is we want a plan. We want to be prepared. We want to understand what is my personal responsibility as a homeowner or renting a home, living in the electorate. What do I expect the service of my council to be when we have a disaster? What will the state government do and what will the federal government do? And people also want to have a conversation about how are we designing our communities and neighbourhoods for the future. And so there are discussions about putting power underground, having disaggregated energy systems, satellite phones, microgrids, neighbourhood batteries, so that when a tree falls in Montrose, you're still okay in Mount Evelyn and other parts of the electorate.
Now, what will you do to support the mental health of our young people in Kilsyth? Yeah,
it is. COVID is definitely, has been a very significant issue for, I think, across the entirety of our communities, irrespective of age or profile or where we live, and particularly for our young people. And I know this from the experience of my own children and their friends, the complexities of mental health support. And the key thing that I'm hearing is actually the inability to access services. And this is true for the NDIS, is that people may have access to funding in Kilsyth, but they are unable to access the services that they need. And so that's a key part that I would respond to in terms of what I've heard, is how can we have different models of service provision or service providers that reach out across the entirety of the electorate. What
do you propose might be done to make something like the NDIS more accessible to participants?
Well, there's four big issues I've heard about the NDIS. I have heard some people that have found it to be a good experience, so it's not all bad. The four things I've heard is that participants are finding the bureaucracy incredibly complex and very difficult to navigate. The rules keep changing for service providers and for allied health professionals. And like I said, people have funding but can't access the services. And fourthly, the independent review process is litigious, it takes too long, and people can't navigate it. So the answer is we've had a number of parliamentary inquiries with recommendations that have not been implemented. And I do believe we need to return to the intention of the NDIS legislation, which was all about quality of services, access to services, and also making sure that the person is at the centre of the support that they need.
What will you do to help older women with safe and affordable housing?
It's an issue I've heard a lot about, security of housing and tenure of housing. I think we have dumbed down the housing discussion in Australia to always talk about home ownership, when there is a huge range of options for people. That we need a national housing strategy. which really explores, home ownership is obviously an option, rental, shared equity, co-housing, shared housing models that are readily available in other countries across the world. When I was a general manager in local government, I looked after the housing portfolio and was the local government council lead for an innovative pilot where there was a disused home in St Kilda that through a peppercorn lease arrangement, we were able to make it available for women over 50, which is unfortunately the largest growing cohort of women that are experiencing insecure housing, couch surfing and rough sleeping. For decades, the federal government and the state governments have not invested in social and affordable community housing. In Victoria, that has just recently been rectified with a fairly significant building program. That not many of those projects are in the electorate of Casey. So we definitely need to have a strong advocate like myself to look at more models that we can bring to this election to provide more choices.
How would you look to best represent the views in federal parliament, and in particular where those views may contradict or not be in alignment with your personal views on a particular policy matter?
It's something I've learnt from decades of doing community engagement with the work that I've done, is that success for me is not consensus, it's engagement and listening. It is absolutely right, Mike. There is a huge range of views across the electorate, across a vast area of policy. But what I would set up over the next three years is 3 years of active engagement and conversations, town hall meetings, Zoom calls, thematic working groups on topics that people are interested in engaging in. How could we use technology so you don't get a text message from Craig Kelly, but you maybe get a 30-second survey from me asking you that there's a vote coming up, how would you like me to vote? So it's a completely different model of representation.
We understand, and the people on the screen will know that Casey communities were particularly impacted by the storm events, over the last 12 months, and they had particular effects on our constituencies in terms of power, telecommunications, resilience, etc. How do you think you might be able to contribute to improving that scene so that we're not caught in future the way we were this time around?
Yeah, I would say a lot of our communities are still suffering a fair degree of trauma. I too, last year, was in my home listening to the sound of trees falling around me. And in 2009, myself and my family, we evacuated 8 times off the mountain during the 2009 fires. And Casey is vulnerable to more extreme weather events that have been predicted will occur over the coming years. And so when I've been out and about talking to people of Casey, consistently is this theme about a national resilience plan, a plan that is prepared in partnership with emergency management services and utility companies, so we are more ready to respond to these more frequent and more extreme events. What people are saying to me is they want to know what is their responsibility as a resident in this electorate. They also want to know what will the council provide when these events occurred, what will the state government provide, and what will be the service of the federal government. So not only are we ready that when you see a storm coming or a flood or a fire, that we can be ready to respond, but more importantly, we can recover more quickly and ideally build back better. And so in the Dandenong Ranges particularly, I've heard that, people couldn't believe that, we lost 25,000 trees, 6,000 homes were without power, and we put up poles and wires again. And everyone knows they're just going to come down again in the next storm. So we need to have a conversation now that I've got the expertise of working across 3 levels of government to start this conversation about, well, what does our future communities look like? Do we need to start a conversation now about putting power underground, having neighbourhood batteries, having microgrids, so that communities have unique and disaggregated energy security, so that if a tree falls down in Alinda, you've still got lights on in Ferny Creek? And that's what people want to know. They want to know that we're more prepared and we're more able to respond and recover from these types of events.
If you're issuing a how to vote card, who will you be placing as number 2 and why?
What I've done, which apparently is quite unique in the political electoral system, is I decided to assess all the candidates on the 2 big policies that I've heard consistently across the electorate, that being delivery without delay of Federal Integrity Commission and their climate change policy. And so I've ranked all the candidates based on those 2 policies. And some of the candidates don't have a policy on a Federal Integrity Commission or climate change. So then I looked at any of their policies around equity and inclusion. And so based on those outcomes, I've ranked the candidates number 1 for me, then it's Greens, Animal Justice Party, Labor, Liberal, and then there's a number of candidates down to number 11.
Do you see it, climate change, as an urgent issue for us? And how do you broadly think that we should be moving away from pollutants to renewable and cleaner technologies?
Look, for me, it's about a planned transition. So what I'm seeing now is lost opportunities for Australia in terms of transitioning our economy. I'll just give you a quick example. Australia is a dumping ground for high emissions, low performance vehicles because we have no fuel standards and we have no clear policy on electric vehicles in this country. And so that is a really clear example that we're just lagging behind the rest of the world. If we were to change our fuel standards and had a goal, by 2030, certain percentage of cars sold would be electric, we would turn that situation around almost immediately. So it's about having the right incentives and having evidence-based policy. And the other thing I just want to say is this is about jobs and investment. It's not about one day turning off a switch on coal and the next day thinking, what do we do? It's about planning, structure and transition so that people are able to have the skills to transition to new jobs which are in the clean economy future.
Question, if you could only do one thing in your political career, what would that be?
I would like to return honour to the office of representation. And I've been surprised in my engagement with the community that people don't know me, come up to me and assume that I am dishonest, not trustworthy, in it for my own game. And I think that's incredibly sad. And so I would like the Office of Public Service to be an honourable office, that our future generations want to be political representatives for their community. Thank you, Patrick. What I've heard from the people of Casey is they've had a gutful of the party politics being tired and negative, and look where it's got us. And we know we need to do better. With your vote, we can return our representation to the values of civic service, not personal gain. I believe our current federal politics does not represent who we are and our values. We expect our leaders to be honest and have integrity. We believe in equality, accountability, and transparency. We want to be hopeful that our future can be different. If you vote the same, you get the same, and you have the freedom to choose something different. It would be an honour to be the first female MP representing you in Casey, and so I am asking for your vote. Thank you.